It was a cold, rain-soaked Thursday in November, just days before Thanksgiving, when my world shattered into pieces I'll never be able to put back together. Lily, my sweet, vibrant 17-year-old daughter, was gone, taken from me in an instant by a drunk driver on a slick, unforgiving road. That night, she had stayed late for extra tutoring, determined as always to excel, her dreams stretching far beyond the small town we called home. But those dreams were crushed under the weight of twisted metal and broken glass. The call came at 9:47 p.m., number I didn't recognize flashing across the screen like a cruel omen. It wasn't Alan who answered. It was me, standing alone in our dimly lit kitchen while he worked late yet again. "There's been an accident," the voice said, hollow and distant, as if reality itself couldn't bear to deliver the news. My knees buckled, but somehow I remained upright, clutching the counter with white-knuckled hands. The scene they described to me later was unbearable. A sharp bend in the road, wet leaves clinging to the asphalt, and a car speeding too fast, its driver oblivious to everything but his own reckless oblivion. Lily's vehicle was obliterated, reduced to a mangled wreck that no one could have survived. They told me they wouldn't let me see her not like this. Her body, it wasn't whole anymore. For weeks afterward, I stared at the photograph of her smiling face on the mantel, unable to reconcile the image of my radiant girl with the unrecognizable remains they buried beneath 6 feet of earth. Even now, months later, the sound of tires skidding on wet pavement sends chills racing down my spine. Losing Lily wasn't just losing a child, it was losing a part of myself, a future I'd envisioned since the moment I first held her tiny hand. She was supposed to graduate high school next spring, go off to college, fall in love, build a life full of laughter and light. Instead, I'm left with silence so heavy it presses against my chest, making every breath feel like a betrayal. And through it all, there's Alan, my husband of 23 years, who seems more like a ghost haunting these halls than the man I married. He doesn't cry. He doesn't scream. He simply disappears, leaving me to drown in grief while he pretends nothing has changed. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing day, a suffocating weight that pressed against my chest like an invisible hand. After Lily's death, Alan didn't just withdraw, he disappeared. Not physically at first. He still came home most nights, though later and later as the weeks went on. But emotionally, he was gone, swallowed whole by some void I couldn't reach or understand. He stopped attending the small rituals I had created to keep her memory alive. A candle lit every evening beside her photograph, a single white rose placed on the dining table every Sunday. "It's morbid," he muttered once when I asked why he never joined me. "We need to move forward, Helen." Move forward? How could we when every corner of this house screamed her name? One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. The soft glow of his phone screen caught my eye from where it lay on the counter. His passcode was easy to guess. It hadn't changed since Lily was born, her birthday. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it, guilt warring with suspicion. What I found shattered something inside me all over again. Alan wasn't just ignoring her memory, he was erasing her. Dozens of photos deleted. Lily blowing out candles on her last birthday, Lily laughing in the backyard under the oak tree, Lily sitting cross-legged on the couch, reading one of her favorite books. Each image vanished, replaced by nothingness. It felt like betrayal, sharper than any knife. I stood there frozen, tears streaming down my face, until the sound of footsteps startled me. Alan appeared in the doorway, bleary-eyed but alert. For a moment, we stared at each other, two strangers standing in what used to be our home. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice rough with accusation. "You think I don't know what you've been doing?" I shot back, holding up the phone like evidence. "How dare you erase her? She was your daughter." His jaw tightened, and for a second I thought he might hit me. Instead, he snatched the phone from my hand and turned away without another word. That night, I heard the front door slam shut. When he returned hours later, reeking of alcohol, I pretended to be asleep. But sleep never came. All I could see were those empty spaces where Lily's face should have been. It had been only 7 weeks since we buried Lily, 7 weeks since I last heard her laugh, since I touched her hand, since I held on to the fragile hope that maybe this was all some terrible nightmare. But Alan didn't believe in nightmares, not anymore. He believed in moving on, or so he said. One morning, as I poured myself a cup of coffee, his voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Helen," he began, standing by the kitchen counter, dressed sharper than I'd seen him in months. His hair was slicked back, his jaw freshly shaved, and for a moment, I almost thought he looked like the man I married. But then he spoke again, his words cold and clinical. "This isn't working. You've changed. You're broken." My hands froze mid-pour, coffee spilling over the rim of the mug, scalding my fingers. I barely felt it. "I want a family, a real family. I can't have that with you anymore." He left before I could respond, leaving me alone with an empty mug and a heart that felt even emptier. 3 days later, I came home early from the grocery store to find a silver convertible parked in our driveway, a car that didn't belong to us. The sight of it made my stomach churn. Inside, laughter echoed from upstairs, high pitched, girlish, unfamiliar. Alan appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down at me as if I were the intruder. "Helen," he said, his tone clipped, "this is Claire. She's going to be staying with us, just for a little while." Claire stepped out from behind him, barely older than Lily would have been. She waved awkwardly, her smile wide and oblivious, as though she belonged here, as though she hadn't just invaded the sacred space where my daughter once lived. "Hi," she chirped, her voice dripping with false cheer. "I've heard so much about you." That night, I lay awake in Lily's bed, staring at the ceiling while Alan slept with her in our room. But what truly shattered me was the next morning. As I walked past Lily's bedroom, I stopped dead in my tracks. There she was, Claire sitting at Lily's vanity, giggling as she applied lipstick in the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, smug and carefree, as if mocking the ghost of the girl whose seat she now occupied. On the table beside her lay one of Lily's old bracelets, its delicate chain dangling loosely around her wrist like a stolen trophy. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Claire turned to me, unfazed. "Oh, sorry," she said lightly, twisting the cap back onto the lipstick tube. "I hope you don't mind. I just thought—" She trailed off, shrugging as if nothing mattered anyway. In that moment, I wanted to scream, to rip the bracelet from her arm and throw her out of my house. But I didn't. Instead, I clenched my fists and walked away, vowing silently that this wasn't over. Claire didn't just live in my house, she devoured it. Every day, she bled Alan's bank account dry with a voraciousness that made me sick to my stomach. Bags from luxury boutiques piled up in the hallway like trophies of her conquest over him. A $3,000 handbag here, stiletto heels plated in gold there. It was as if she were trying to fill some void within herself by hoarding objects no one could ever truly need. And yet, nothing satisfied her for long. Each purchase seemed only to fuel her insatiable appetite for more. One afternoon, while folding laundry upstairs, I heard the doorbell ring repeatedly, a delivery man struggling under the weight of yet another package. Claire greeted him with an exaggerated laugh and tipped him generously, using my cashmere scarf as a makeshift wallet. But her extravagance wasn't limited to shopping sprees. She turned our once quiet home into something unrecognizable, a circus of noise and chaos. Almost nightly, she invited friends over, their raucous laughter echoing through the halls like nails on glass. The living room, where Lily used to sit quietly reading or sketching, became a den of cigarette smoke and spilled wine. They drank straight from the bottle, danced barefoot on furniture polished by years of careful maintenance, and left behind stains I knew would never fully come out. One evening, I walked past the kitchen and saw empty bottles littering the counter, champagne flutes smeared with lipstick marks, and a faint smell of marijuana lingering in the air. My hands trembled as I picked up a glass, resisting the urge to throw it against the wall. It was during one of these nights, when the house buzzed with strangers' voices, that I discovered something worse. Unable to sleep, I wandered downstairs hoping to find peace, but instead I found Claire sitting at Alan's desk in the study. Her face lit up by the glow of his laptop screen. She typed furiously, oblivious to my presence. Curiosity, or perhaps rage, got the better of me, and I stepped closer, catching glimpses of words that made my blood boil. "You're so generous. Rich guy," she wrote, followed by flirtatious emojis and promises of meeting soon. My breath hitched. This wasn't just casual banter. This was betrayal layered upon betrayal. Before I could confront her, she noticed me standing there and slammed the laptop shut. "What are you doing creeping around?" she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't pretend you care about privacy. You're the one who won't leave." Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't respond. Instead, I turned away, silently vowing to uncover every secret she thought she could hide. Profile QWN2.5-Max, English version. It started with the smallest of things, a receipt left carelessly on the kitchen counter, a text notification that flickered briefly before Alan could silence it. But I wasn't just going to sit back and let Claire devour what was left of my life. Every piece of evidence I gathered felt like reclaiming a fragment of myself, stitching together the tattered edges of who I used to be. Late at night, while Alan slept soundly in their bed, or rather, his bed now, I began sifting through his laptop, scrolling through months' worth of emails, messages, and browser history. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Alan hadn't been faithful to me for years. Claire was simply the latest installment in a long line of betrayals. There were countless exchanges with women whose names meant nothing to me until I found Denise. Denise wasn't just another fling. She was deliberate, calculating. A real estate agent with polished nails and an Instagram feed full of luxury listings. She had played along with Alan's fantasies until he pushed too far. "I'm not interested in being anyone's second choice," she wrote in one email thread, her words sharp enough to cut glass. He begged her to reconsider, promising vacations, expensive dinners, even a future together. But Denise saw through him, or perhaps she grew bored. Either way, she ghosted him 2 weeks before Claire arrived on our doorstep. It was chilling how seamlessly one woman replaced the next, as if Alan viewed them as interchangeable props in his desperate attempt to rewrite his miserable existence. But Claire wasn't as clever as she thought. Her lies unraveled slowly, almost tauntingly. One evening, after Alan stormed out following another argument about money, I slipped into his office and copied everything from his phone onto an external drive. Messages, photos, voice memos. Among the chaos, I discovered something damning, a fertility clinic bill under Claire's name. She wasn't pregnant. She was freezing her eggs, likely part of some influencer deal where she earned referral bonuses. The realization made me sick, not because I cared about her deception, but because Alan had fallen for it so completely. That same night, I left 3 pregnancy tests on the counter with a note. "Since the first one was so exciting, I thought you might enjoy confirming." Claire said nothing, but she threw them away before Alan saw. The cracks between them widened after that, while Claire doubled down on her charade. Touching her stomach dramatically and avoiding caffeine, I quietly exposed her secrets. A misplaced receipt here, a whispered comment there, it didn't take much to plant doubt in Alan's mind. And when he finally confronted her, I watched from the shadows, my heart pounding with satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. For Lily, for me, for every lie they'd forced me to swallow. It was during one of those nights when Alan was out meeting clients, leaving Claire alone in the house, that I stumbled upon something far more damning than I'd expected. While Claire lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone and sipping wine her voice, occasionally breaking into giggles over some text, I quietly slipped into Alan's office. The external hard drive I'd been using to copy his phone data still sat in my bag. But tonight, I wanted something tangible, something undeniable. That's when I saw it, a crumpled receipt peeking out from under a stack of papers on his desk. A fertility clinic? My pulse quickened as I smoothed it out. The details were clinical, cold, and unmistakable. Claire wasn't pregnant. She wasn't even trying to be. Instead, she had frozen her eggs, a procedure she'd laughingly referred to as part of an influencer deal in one of her private calls. It wasn't about building a family. It was about racking up referral bonuses. The discovery made me sick not because I cared about Claire's lies, but because Alan had swallowed them whole without question. I dug deeper, opening files from the joint account I'd been monitoring for weeks. What I found next felt like a punch to the gut. Claire had bled us dry 12,473. Creditor Shirker Designer handbags, spa treatments, hotel stays, and Avena 2,000 pair of shoes labeled as essential. Each transaction mocked me. Each dollar spent a reminder how little respect she had for what we once had. And Alan? He hadn't blinked an open checkbook, blind faith, or perhaps willful ignorance. Whatever it was, he'd let her destroy us financially while pretending everything was fine. I printed the statements late that night, highlighting every extravagant purchase, every fraudulent promise. The fertility clinic bill stood out most prominently, circled in red ink. By morning, I placed the envelope containing all the evidence neatly on Alan's desk, knowing exactly when he'd find it. When he did, his face turned ashen. "She's not pregnant," he muttered, slumping into his chair like a deflated balloon. She said it was for us." His voice cracked, betrayal etched into every syllable. For the first time since Lily died, Alan looked truly broken, not angry, not arrogant, just hollow. But there was no pity in my heart. This was justice, plain and simple. Claire wasn't just using him. She was dismantling everything we built, piece by piece. And now he finally understood. The unraveling between Alan and Claire wasn't gradual. It was a sudden, violent collapse, like a dam breaking under relentless pressure. It began the night he confronted her about the fertility clinic bill I'd left on his desk. "You lied to me," he accused, his voice low but trembling with barely contained rage. Claire didn't flinch. Instead, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed through the kitchen. "Oh, please, Alan," she sneered, tossing her hair over one shoulder. "Did you really think I'd waste my time having kids with you? You're boring, predictable, and honestly pathetic." Her words hit him like bullets, each syllable laced with venom. He stood frozen for a moment, as if trying to process what she meant, that their entire relationship had been nothing more than a calculated game. I stood outside the doorway, invisible in the shadows, listening to every word. The argument escalated quickly, their voices rising until they filled the house like an unbearable storm. "You used me," Alan shouted, slamming his fist onto the counter hard enough to rattle the dishes. "I gave you everything, money, this house, my trust, and you threw it all away with your lies." Claire's face twisted into something ugly, her mascara-streaked eyes blazing with fury. "Your trust?" She spat back, stepping closer to him. Don't act like you cared about anyone but yourself. You brought me here because you couldn't handle losing Lily or Helen. You needed a distraction, and I was convenient. In the chaos, Claire backed up too far, knocking over the antique lamp perched precariously on the edge of the table. For a split second, there was silence, the kind that comes before destruction as the lamp crashed to the floor, shattering into jagged shards of glass and porcelain. My breath caught in my throat. That lamp wasn't just an object, it was Lily's last gift to me, bought with money she'd saved from babysitting jobs. She'd wrapped it herself, her small hands carefully tying the ribbon around the box. Now it lay destroyed at Claire's feet, its delicate filigree reduced to dust. Alan stared at the broken pieces, his face pale with shock. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he whispered hoarsely, but Claire only rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a sneer. "It's just a stupid lamp," she muttered dismissively. To her, it might have been insignificant, but to us, it was sacred. I clenched my fists, biting down on the urge to step forward and scream at her. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot, letting the weight of her betrayal sink in deeper for both of them. The morning after the argument, the house felt eerily quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Claire was gone before sunrise, leaving behind only the faint but overpowering scent of her bubblegum-scented perfume lingering in the hallway. Final insult to everything she'd touched. But what happened moments before her departure would stay etched in my memory like a scar. I had been upstairs packing away some of Lily's old books when I heard a soft clinking sound from my bedroom. My stomach tightened with suspicion. Alan was still downstairs nursing his third whiskey, so it couldn't have been him. Quietly, I descended the stairs and pushed open the door to my room. There she was, Claire, standing at my jewelry box, her hands trembling slightly as she stuffed one of my grandmother's diamond earrings into the pocket of her designer coat. "Put it back," I said sharply, my voice cutting through the silence like glass shattering. She froze, her head snapping toward me, eyes wide with guilt and defiance. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her lips curled into that familiar sneer, but there was a flicker of fear beneath her bravado. "It's not like you're gonna miss it," she muttered, trying to sound nonchalant, though her voice wavered under the weight of being caught. "You've got plenty more where this came from." I stepped closer, my gaze steady and unyielding. "Take it out of your pocket. Now." The authority of my tone startled even myself. This wasn't just about the earring, it was about every lie, every theft, every careless act she'd inflicted on my life. Slowly, reluctantly, she pulled the earring from her pocket and dropped it onto the dresser, her fingers brushing against the wood as if reluctant to let go. "You think I don't know what you are?" I continued, my voice low but laced with venom. "You're nothing but a parasite feeding off people too blind to see through you." Her face flushed red, anger replacing her earlier arrogance. "Fine," she spat, slamming the jewelry box shut. "Keep your stupid trinkets. Like I said, you're all toxic anyway." With that, she stormed out, dragging her suitcase noisily behind her. Minutes later, the front door slammed, shaking the walls. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she'd stood, the air heavy with her absence. Yet, despite the tension, I felt something else, an ember of triumph burning quietly within me. She may have tried to take pieces of my life, but she hadn't won. Not really. The day of mediation arrived under a slate gray sky, the kind that mirrored the weight in my chest. Alan walked into the conference room, wearing a suit that no longer fit him properly, too loose in the shoulders, too tight across his hollowed frame. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically but in presence, as if the man who once towered over me with arrogance and authority had been stripped down to something fragile and exposed. Mara sat beside me, calm and composed, her leather folder resting on the table like a weapon waiting to be wielded. I could feel Alan's eyes darting between us, searching for cracks, for weakness, but there were none left to find. When Mara began laying out our terms, her voice was steady, clinical, unyielding. Full ownership of the house, the cars, every last penny from our shared investments. It wasn't just a demand. It was retribution wrapped in legal precision. Alan's face reddened as she spoke, his fingers tapping nervously against the edge of the table. "This is absurd," he snapped, leaning forward. "She's turning this into a war." His tone carried the same condescension I'd heard countless times before, but this time it didn't sting. Instead, I smiled faintly, letting him see the cold resolve in my gaze. Mara slid a stack of documents across the table, each page meticulously organized. Bank statements showing Claire's extravagant spending, screenshots of Alan's flirtatious texts with Denise, even receipts from the fertility clinic where Claire had frozen her eggs. "These are indisputable," Mara said coolly, her words slicing through the tension like a blade. "And they paint a very clear picture of financial misconduct, emotional abandonment, and repeated betrayal." Alan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching beneath the table. For a moment, he tried to fight back, blaming me for driving him away, accusing me of being unstable and vindictive. But Mara didn't flinch. She countered with surgical precision, dismantling his arguments one by one until his excuses crumbled into dust. When she placed the photo of Lily on the table, a candid shot of her laughing in the garden, Alan froze. The air seemed to thicken, suffocating him with the weight of everything he'd lost. He stared at the image, his lips trembling slightly, before finally signing the agreement without another word. It wasn't defeat. It was surrender. As we stood to leave, Alan muttered bitterly, "You've changed, Helen. You're not the woman I married." I turned to him, my voice cutting like ice. "No, I'm not. And neither are you." The house felt like a tomb after Alan left, its walls echoing with the ghosts of everything we had lost. But I wasn't going to let it stay that way, not anymore. Every trace of him had to go, every scar he'd carved into this place erased as if he'd never existed here. It started with the obvious things, his clothes still hanging in the closet, the toothbrush he'd forgotten by the sink, the framed photo of us on our wedding day that now seemed like a cruel joke. I packed them all into black garbage bags and hauled them out to the curb without hesitation. Then came the harder parts, the scratches on the wall from the night he slammed the door during one of our fights about Lily's college plans, the faint scuff marks on the floor where Claire once dragged her suitcase, the lingering smell of his cologne trapped in the fabric of the couch. I scrubbed and patched and painted until there was nothing left but blank spaces. The dent in the wall, gone. The cracks in the plaster, filled. Even the air felt lighter when I finally opened the windows and let the sea breeze sweep through. Every room became a canvas for renewal, but Lily's remained untouched until the very end. Her lavender curtains still hung softly at the window, the same ones she'd picked out at 16 because they matched her soul. Her favorite book sat on the shelf, spine cracked from countless readings, pages dog-eared where she'd paused to dream or cry. For months, I couldn't bring myself to touch any of it, as though disturbing her belongings would mean losing her all over again. But now, standing in her room with a cedar chest I'd restored just for this moment, I carefully packed away her journals one by one. Each page smelled faintly of her, of innocence, of hope, of a future stolen too soon. This wasn't letting go. It was holding on, but differently. Without pain. Without pretending the past hadn't happened. When the estate agent arrived, a kind woman named Dana with warm eyes, I watched quietly as she stepped into Lily's old room. She gasped softly, running her fingers along the edge of the dresser. "This would be perfect for a nursery," she murmured, glancing at me. And then, For the first time in years, I smiled, a real smile, deep and unburdened. A young couple bought the house almost immediately, their excitement palpable as they walked through each room. They were expecting their first child, and I could see the joy radiating from them. As I handed over the keys, I whispered a silent prayer. May this house give you what it took from me. The envelope was plain, unassuming, just like the message inside. I didn't need grand gestures or dramatic confrontations anymore. What I had to say required no embellishment. It was a photograph of Lily, taken on one of those rare sunny afternoons when she'd begged me to let her skip piano practice and sit in the garden instead. Her smile radiated pure joy, sunlight dancing across her face, as if nature itself conspired to make her happy. On the back, I wrote simply, "She deserved better, and now so do I." The words were deliberate, sharp-edged, not an accusation but a declaration. When Alan received it days later, I imagined him staring at the photo, his hands trembling slightly, the silence around him heavy with regret. He wouldn't call me, I knew that much. But the seed was planted, a quiet reminder that some wounds never fully heal, especially when they're ignored. A week after mailing the letter, I stood in front of my new home for the first time, a small cottage perched on the edge of the coastline. Its white walls were weathered by salt and wind, its shutters painted a cheerful shade of blue. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender, a scent I'd chosen intentionally. This house wasn't about replacing what I'd lost. It was about creating something entirely new. There was no room for ghosts here, only light, space, and possibility. That afternoon, I unpacked my paints, brushes still stiff from disuse. My hands shook as I dipped the brush into vibrant reds and blues, streaking colors across the canvas without restraint. For years, I convinced myself that painting was frivolous, unnecessary, a hobby best left behind when life demanded more serious pursuits. Now, it felt like breathing again. Each morning began with the sound of waves crashing against the shore, their rhythm steady and grounding. I walked along the beach barefoot, collecting seashells and fragments of driftwood, marveling at how the ocean could transform even broken things into something beautiful. Margaret, the widow who ran the flower stall down by the pier, became my unlikely confidant. We talked about everything and nothing, loss, love, lemons, and somehow, through her stories, I found pieces of myself I thought were irretrievably lost. She taught me how to arrange flowers, her hands guiding mine until the bouquets looked less chaotic and more intentional. "Life doesn't stop," she said once, tying off a bundle of daisies, "but it gives you chances to start over." And so I did. I painted sunrises, seascapes, and abstract swirls of color that meant nothing and everything all at once. Each stroke was a step forward, each completed piece a testament to survival. At night, sitting by the window with tea steaming in my mug, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't saved me, it was this. Choosing to live, choosing to create, choosing to find beauty despite everything. Alan's betrayal, Claire's cruelty, they weren't the end of my story. They were merely chapters. I closed forever, and for the first time in years, I felt whole.